Then, children of the night, what music they make.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're here.
Welcome to my nightmare.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Kill you all.
Do you want to die tonight?
You don't know what death is.
We belong dead.
Here's Johnny.
I shot him 6 times.
Onto your butt.
Reach for your legs.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Pods and Monsters.
I'm so excited.
Today, we are going to be talking about Godzilla, the original film and the American version of the original Japanese film.
Godzilla, king of the monsters, alive, surging up from the depths of the sea on a tidal wave of terror to wreak vengeance on mankind. Godzilla, king of the monsters, incredible titan of terror.
So, my name is Robert, and with me, as always, is...
Cynthia.
And today we have a special guest, Godzilla expert.
Expert.
Say your name.
Hello, folks. This is Aidan Casserly, monster artist. Very happy to be here with you guys tonight.
Well,
We're
thank
so
you.
excited to have you.
Oh, thank you very much.
So you draw monster art, eh?
I draw monster art. You know, once upon a time, I was required to learn math and history, and I'm like, you know what? Screw that. These notebooks are better off for monsters.
Yes.
And believe it or not, I've made a career out of it. So I love what I do. I love the classic horror genre, and it's wonderful being, down here in SoCal where there's a huge audience for that sort of thing, and obviously fellow weirdos like you guys who love it too, so
Well,
thank you for having me on.
Of course.
our
Thank
pleasure.
you for coming.
So why don't we begin talking about Godzilla? Let me say real quick, my relationship with Godzilla
Oh, yes.
is, he's been a little friend of mine. I'm just,
He's someone we can all look up to.
yes. Except for King Ghidorah.
Oh,
He has to look down.
well, but he can look down and up and to the left if he
Yeah,
wants
but he's
to.
taller than him.
That is true.
So with Godzilla, I've always loved the Godzilla movies, but I'm not as familiar with them as I am with Universal monster movies.
Oh.
So growing up, I would watch a lot of the monster fights and scenes, but watching the whole movie all the way through, I didn't really do too much. The one I did the most with that I love is my favorite Godzilla movie is Godzilla's Revenge. But the original Godzilla, Cynthia and I watched the American version, but we're going to be talking about both American and Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've seen the Japanese one all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what did you know about Godzilla before, Cynthia?
Well, I had very, very recently watched the American version of Godzilla, 1956, I believe.
You have watched that recently?
Well, I'd seen it prior to us watching it for this.
Oh, okay.
So I had seen it, and it was a lot different than what I was expecting because I had grown up knowing all of the more, I'm going to say more comical, more whimsical ones.
When he became a child superhero.
Yeah.
When he became more marketable towards children.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a little shocking, not shocking, but it was different to see such a serious, toned film.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I absolutely fell in love with it. However, I never revisited it. It was like one of those things where I was like, it's a good movie, you should watch it. And I didn't really watch it all the way through until today. So I was just kind of racking my brain and remembering what I could remember, and I knew that the guy from Rear Window was in it.
Right.
Raymond Burr,
Burr.
who's also Perry Mason.
And Ironside.
Yeah, Raymond Burr. What else do you remember?
Godzilla was an atomic monster. I knew that it was some sort of metaphor and or callback to the U.S. attack on the Japanese. Also, that I pretty much knew that a white guy was shoehorned into this Japanese movie.
Okay.
And that everyone was dubbed is what my assumption was going into it and paying attention. So those are my notes. Those are my notes going into the movie.
Speaking of everyone being dubbed, let me ask you, Aidan. For the Godzilla sequels in particular, do you prefer watching the dubbed versions or subtitles?
What is interesting is that in this day and age, it's very easy to find the original versions now with subtitles and whatnot. We're probably going to be talking a bit about the Americanization of this movie, so I'll hold off on a little bit of that for a little bit further down. But there are some of the films where the dubbing is okay, and then some of the films where it's not. And what Inthia is talking about shoehorning in an American actor, there are some instances in Kaiju movies where that's done effectively, and there are some times when it's really not done effectively. I'm probably going to be mentioning the Americanization of Varan the Unbelievable as we go along with this podcast, because that's one of the several examples I can point to on how not to Americanize a Kaiju movie.
All right, so I think we're ready to talk about the movie itself. So Inthia and I watched the American one. Aidan, you watched both recently, right? Mm-hmm. So, Inthia, let's talk about the American one, go through it, and Aidan, if you want to jump in there when you can and talk about differences between the two,
sure,
feel free.
I was just going to say the movie starts off right away with one. The American version begins with a nice prologue that actually takes place much, much later in the film, after the big attack.
Right.
Whereas the Japanese one begins pretty much out at sea with Godzilla's first attack. Oh, spoilers, it's Godzilla. But I thought it was a very interesting way to get the viewer's attention right off the bat, as soon as the title fades out, we fade right in. There's like the smoldering city.
Yeah, that's what I was noticing.
It gets you. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me mention real quick, since you just mentioned the title, for Godzilla, King of the Monsters, the American version of the original, the title, the font is incredible. It's one of the best fonts.
It's very
good.
Very Monster Kid, Famous Monsters kind of thing that we would love with the drippy and the
it's
and
so
that's what I was like. I really enjoyed it that it had all the roars of Godzilla playing in the background, and it was like the water bubbling. So you get a sense, it sets up that, that opening sequence.
Yeah, the Japanese movies, the opening credits is just basically hearing Godzilla in that footstep again and again. And the footstep, I almost sort of feel like at some points it's not even meant to be taken as a literal footstep, like you're hearing him walking along, as it is just that music pounding at you.
Yeah.
I kind of felt that way too, because later in the movie you hear the footsteps as he's approaching, he's in the water.
Yeah.
So.
And it's also very even too. It's kind of hard to tell whether or not it's meant to be him, the literal sound of him walking around and making that Brontosaurus thunder lizard noise, or if it's supposed to be just part of the music. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's that's the thing, is that the music and the sound effects were both designed by the same man, who was Akira Ifukube, who did a beautiful score for this film, as I'm sure we'll be talking about later, which thankfully is left intact in the American version.
Yeah.
So as Aidan mentioned before, we're pretty much seeing Tokyo in rubbles and in ruin, and we hear a voiceover.
This is Tokyo, once a city of 6 million people. What has happened here was caused by a force which, up until a few days ago, was entirely beyond the scope of man's imagination.
And we're introduced to Steve Martin.
Steve Martin, the actor?
Oh boy. So let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, Raymond Burr is playing a character named Steve Martin.
They call him by his first and last name almost the entire movie. I think maybe less than 5 times they call him Steve.
Steve, yeah.
But it's Steve Martin no matter what. So at first I was like, Steve Martin, and then I was like, yep, his name's Steve Martin. This makes sense. Cool. So he is in Tokyo on his way to Cairo for as he liked to call it, a social visit. And he's also mentioned that there's a disaster that they don't know what's causing these issues, what's causing all of these disasters. I believe he mentioned some ships had disappeared.
Right.
So he's in Tokyo. We also meet, and you'll forgive me for the names, I believe it's Amiko, who's the daughter of a paleontologist.
Dr. Yamano, yeah.
So She comes to talk to him while he's in this triage center, and they're having this conversation, which I didn't remember that we start pretty much in the middle of the situation, and then it goes into like explaining how we got there.
Yeah, it goes
and
to
so
flashback.
it felt really like they just kind of were like, this is this person, and then she just like left. Like she was whisked away, and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Is she going to come into play? And thankfully she does, but
She does,
Yes.
but that does seem... The Japanese characters do seem to suffer in the American version, in my opinion. Like some stuff was cut out. I don't know exactly because I don't remember the Japanese version very well.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted to mention, especially in those opening shots, the movie is shot so great. The Japanese version.
Mm-hmm.
The American stuff, it's still shot pretty good, but you could tell the difference.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's so rich.
Yeah.
The Japanese version.
Yeah.
Like, remember when he's being taken away on the stretcher and he looks over and then it's a panning shot of all the victims? It's
Yeah.
like, that shot is just beautiful of all the victims, and it's
Yeah.
back to him, and you could tell the difference.
It's serviceable. I mean, that's the thing is I don't recall how much money was thrown into the American version, but I'm pretty sure Gojira back at its native Japan, I think had a pretty good sized budget allotted to it.
Right.
So
yeah, it was. It's easy to tell. At first, I was like, "Oh, is he there? Is he not there?" And then,
Yeah.
as it goes on, I'm like, later on in the movie, he's standing outside, but there's a shadow directly behind his head the
Yeah.
whole time, and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well, this is our first instance of something that is unfortunately very obvious to notice is when Raymond Burr is talking to body doubles, and that's something that a lot of people get a laugh out of. It's done as well as it can. There are some instances where it is a little off. You're talking about the first time he talks to Emiko, it cuts to footage where her eye line, unfortunately, is way too high up, and it's a little jarring. And plus, the fact that they only show her face very quickly is because she was not. I think the shot of her speaking back to Steve Martin was not in the hospital scene. I think that might have been a shot of her much later on in the.
Right.
In Serizawa's home or something like that,
okay.
possibly.
Yeah, and then it feels like sometimes he's having like almost one-sided conversations because they only show his face when the other person's responding.
It's tricky, that's the thing. And there are scenes later on where I think he's even talking to Dr. Yamane, and they simply had no footage of him that synced up to it, so it's just him and the body double the entire time. So
Yeah. But even getting the American actor to work with this Japanese footage, it was so smart of the writers to make him a newsman so he can be present and witness everything and not have to be involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that the Americanization does very well is rather than making him a super important character that requires to be shoehorned into the story, is that Raymond Burr's character is very much an observer. And in that way, it's easy for us in the American audience to more or less put ourselves in his shoes because he's sort of watching a lot of these things happen. He doesn't really have too much involvement in the plot. If any involvement in the plot, he's mostly the one who's collecting information, kind of like we are.
I remember Inthia made a comment during the movie that when he says, like, can you tell me what he's saying? I have to...
My Japanese is a little rusty.
Yeah, but we already know by that point that he doesn't speak Japanese.
Yeah.
But it's funny because he still kind of has to remind the audience, this is why this guy's repeating everything. You know?
There we go.
I'm afraid my Japanese is a little rusty.
What's interesting about this film is we were talking about the dubbing earlier, is how much of this film is left in Japanese and then given lines with Burr. I mean, some reviewers have pointed out that a lot of the times the Japanese dialogue does not match whatsoever what the interpreter is saying, but that's just their way of passing the story along, getting the story along and getting it rolling without necessarily having to perfectly match it with what they're saying in the scene. Some people have even pointed out that you can hear them saying Gojira in those early scenes before the monster is even introduced.
Oh.
Right.
So from here, we end up on the ocean, and there are some sailors that are just having a lovely time above deck. And we pretty much see Godzilla in action, or our first encounter with Godzilla.
This was the first scene in the Japanese version. The movie started off the bat with this scene.
That is an intense scene to just start off a movie
Yeah.
with, because there's the white flash, which I felt was very reminiscent from my very limited knowledge that what I know of an atomic bomb. Everyone's blown back, so water starts to bubble and froth, and then the ship sinks. So it's like super dramatic, and that's an intense way to start a movie.
It gets right in there too, and there's no dialogue in that scene either, or not any important dialogue. It's just boom, it happens.
Right.
They're gone.
And that scene was inspired by true events. What was it, Aidan?
The Lucky Dragon incident.
There was a fishing boat that apparently did not. They wandered
into
testing.
testing grounds. Yeah.
Which
they didn't know about.
There were nuclear testings going on, and this ship was not notified or was forgotten about, somehow missed. And there was a bright flash, and they all became exposed to radioactivity. It didn't catch on fire and sink like in the movie.
No, but there were still bad ramifications too.
Right, and because Japan at that time was so afraid of nuclear testing or radioactivity because of what was going on in the world, it was a very big deal, and it made headlines that this ship got all this radioactivity.
There was a big recall on tuna because the tuna that had been caught on the ship was possibly irradiated and may have reached the market. I don't remember if that did or not, but there was still a massive recall of tuna, and it was a pretty frightening incident. Yeah.
Wow.
So this was a big fear of Japan, and really that's a big part of Godzilla is the radioactivity. Later in the movie, you know, radioactive areas follow where Godzilla had been. Godzilla really is art imitating life.
Yeah. There was that hospital scene which was bumped up earlier in the movie. You remember when they're running the Geiger counter over the child, and the child seems fine, but of course is probably horribly poisoned by that point. Yeah. It's really heavy stuff for a monster movie, but you know what? That's important too.
No, it's super effective.
It is.
It's really interesting the way that they were talking about real life situations with a fantasy creature.
It's not easy to deal with, but sometimes, you know, that's the way you deal. You have to have your eyes open to these kind of situations. And
for sure.
Godzilla, even in the American version, a lot of that fear still comes across. You know, they didn't try to hide it necessarily.
Yeah. And, you know, the reason that it is so hard to even think about how serious this Godzilla movie is just because we know what happens to Godzilla in the sequels, how he becomes a childhood hero to everyone. And, you know, there were things like the director, Ishiro Honda, was a prisoner of war and during World War II. And he saw lots of destruction, you know, throughout his experiences. And that's a rumor as to one of the inspirations for the Godzilla story was just he saw this destruction and was just thinking, like, what could he show to create destruction at this level? Basically.
Yeah, it has a very documentary style, and by that I mean it's just showing you the damage, showing you the people suffering is something they do not pull away from, and it's important.
Yeah, later on in the movie, when Godzilla does make it to Tokyo, there's that one scene with the woman holding onto her children.
The war widow, yes.
Yes, and
they kept that in. They didn't translate what she was saying. It's implied that this is a woman who lost her husband in World War II. She's holding her children close, and she tells them, "We're going to be with Daddy soon." And even without the translation, that's the fact that they left that in. It's still really heavy stuff. You know?
Yeah. So from there, we end up seeing Steve Martin on a plane, and he is smoking some cigarettes. Everyone's having a really luxurious flight over, and as soon as he lands, he is pulled aside by the local authorities because the scene prior to that happened right at the same time as he was flying into Tokyo. They want to find out if he saw anything weird.
Are they just... So they're just asking everyone on the plane because they could have looked out the window and saw something? Is that why they're interviewing them?
Yeah, and you know, this was before gremlins were on the wings of the planes and stuff like that. But yeah, they basically, as Steve Martin says, he points out that everybody on the flight was interrogated, and chances are nobody saw anything unless if they were looking out the window and seeing big flashes of light. But it was also, I think it was also at nighttime or something like that.
Was it? It was a nighttime flight? I don't remember seeing anything.
I got the impression because he said he was asleep, or that's the thing, and it seems like most of the characters in that shot were asleep or enjoying their cigarettes and liquor on airplanes as he could have in those days.
That airplane did look really... I was like, oh, this is a luxury flight. Like, everyone looked all nice in their suits, and it just looked so nice. And it was Pan Am, so I really like when they showed the outside of the plane, which was like, I guess, well, when we first see the ship being attacked at the beginning, they have a little model, and then you see the plane and it's a little model. I love all the little models in this movie.
Yeah, they're so good.
The model work is very good, and this is as good of a time as any to mention Eiji Tsuburaya, who was the special effects guy. And if you love Kaiju and Tokusatsu, you definitely know who Tsuburaya and his family and his legacy are. The miniature work in this film is really good because Tsuburaya, I believe, actually did miniature work for propaganda films prior to this.
Wow.
Yeah, for like those little war training films or whatnot. I think he did stuff like that. Harryhausen also did that too. So, some of the special effects guys cut their teeth in ways that you wouldn't have imagined.
Yeah.
And speaking of Harryhausen, when this idea of Godzilla was first brought up, stop motion was a thought, whether it was going to be done that way, but they thought it would cost too much money, take too long to film, and just having a guy in a suit would just be more feasible.
And yet there's still a couple of stop motion shots in this movie. If you
That's
can
right.
catch them, you can catch them.
His tail for one.
His tail for one, and an army truck falling over.
That's the shot you commented on.
Yeah, that's either stop motion or it's cutting frames from a model. I forget.
Yeah.
But both this film and King Kong vs. Godzilla both have not the greatest puppet work ever. So that's probably like the one thing about Tsuburaya's work in this film I would more or less kind of criticize. Is just that the puppet doesn't really match the full body suit, but we'll be seeing a lot of that puppet over the course of the movie. It's no worse than Black Scorpion and constantly cutting to Drooly the barfing puppet just spliced in between Obi's beautiful stop motion work. But,
how do you say his name? Eiji
Tsuburaya.
How many years did he continue to work on Godzilla movies for?
Tsuburaya would have mostly been involved with the Godzilla movies from the 50s until the 60s, and around the 60s is when he branched off into his own company, which gave us Ultra Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7 and whatnot. I believe he died at the end of the 60s. He would have died somewhere in the production of Godzilla's Revenge, and he wouldn't have actually have done too much on it, but the film is still dedicated to his memory.
Okay.
Which I guess means his final full Godzilla movie would have been Destroy All Monsters, even though it was busy with his own company at the time of that too.
So he's pulled aside, and this is when we start seeing him really interacting with more actors, and we rarely see the actors talking directly to him. It's mostly just his face. We hear their voices, but it's just his face.
It seems like the Japanese actors who are speaking English are still dubbed. Is that?
It depends. I mean,
like the guy that's always translating for him seems to be dubbed.
No,
even though he's speaking, is he? No, not?
He's an American actor. It's obvious when Martin is talking to a character from the original version is when they resort to body doubles and splicing in quick clips. But his guide, the guy who interrogates him and goes with him to Odo Island, no, that's an actor in the American version too.
Did you say you remember the character name?
No, I've totally blanked because I forget how far he gets into the movie before he is possibly killed off during Godzilla's attack on Tokyo later on.
Is it Frank?
Is it Iwanaga?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Security officer.
There we go.
That's his name, Mom.
Okay. Whether that's the character's name or the actor's name, I'm sorry, I don't remember. We'll just call him Frank.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it literally just has him billed as security officer.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, we'll call him Frank because I doubt his mom named him security when he was born.
I figured he would have had a
banking job.
Actually had a name. He's sort of a prominent role in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean...
So, he's questioning him about if he saw anything unusual during the flight. And from here, they end up having a conversation, and he tells him what happened. And they are in the process of sending a rescue ship out to go pick up anyone who may have survived this attack. And that rescue ship meets the same fate. Gets attacked, white light, and then the water catches on fire and it gets sunk. And that's when I wrote down that the models are just so amazing. I really do love the really models.
Well, I do like how the little archways, you can see them wiggling back and forth. Like you could tell that it's not withstanding the elements of weather the way it should, but still, it's great.
No, it's so great.
I just love the little things you can look for to tell that it's a model.
Yeah, it's a tough trick to pull off because effects like water and fire always give away their scale. There's a world of difference between what a match looks like and what a burning city looks like. And the fact that the ship models look as good as they do out in the the big pool was what its name sounds like, a great big pool that Toho constructed, and so many of the Godzilla movies were shot using this gigantic pool. And then I think in the 90s, I want to say, it was paved over and made into a parking lot.
Oh my gosh.
So now you can show Godzilla, keying Ghidorah's car, when he's pissed off at him.
So from here, our friend Steve Martin ends up calling Chicago, I believe, and ends up having what I felt like was a very Michael Scott moment. But because it took me a while to realize that he was dictating a note to someone. I thought he was giving them a headline, because he says, Japanese ship disasters puzzles world, and then kept going.
Japanese ship disasters puzzle world. 8 ships obliterated by mysterious blinding flash of fire. No survivors found. Radio reports from stricken ships gave same message. Terrible sea of...
And like there's a scene in The Office where Michael Scott is like, I'll give you a headline, and it's like a paragraph long, and I'm like, is he giving them a headline for something? What is happening? But it turns out he was giving a note to his editor.
Well, it's kind of how you would decipher a telegram back then.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is also one of the other differences between the American and the Japanese version, is the fact that there's not really any... I mean, there's news that Godzilla's there, and Steve Martin is free to pass it along. In the Japanese version, one of the scenes has a conflict where they don't know whether or not Godzilla's attack should be known to the public. This is a bit later on in the film, but it is a scene that is cut, where after Yamane gives the news that this is a living creature called Godzilla, he's the cause of it, he's radioactive, a politician stands up and actually says, should we let the public know about this? Number one, it could cause a panic, but his other concern is world relations and whether or not this is something that is going to call upon badly with the Japanese. And of course, he's challenged by another politician who says the truth is the truth. The truth should not be covered up. If there is something radioactive and terrible, people need to know about it. And it turns into this big fight in the government building, which in the American version that conversation was cut out, so you just see people start fighting for no good reason.
I was wondering, because it was like, they were done talking, and then all of a sudden everyone just starts...
there's a big flurry.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, those conversations are probably real conversations the Japanese government would have had about radioactivity.
Yeah. So in this, we also find out that Steve decides that he's going to stay and find out what's happening.
I think the next part is the Odo Island I've seen, I believe.
Yes, there's a survivor.
Does he survive and die? Or does he just survive?
In the American version, they say his visit was a short one, which implies that he's dead. I've seen one reviewer say that this is a character who lives, though, and appears later in the film, although I'm sorry to say I don't recognize who the character was. But for the intents of the American version, he's dead.
So then Steve and officials go to the island to go question people, and then they claim to have seen a monster, and that's when you start finding out about Godzilla.
Yeah. So Steve Martin is a reporter. There is a reporter character in the Japanese version named Hagewara, and you can only see him in clips in the American version. Most of his scenes were not kept intact, but yeah, in the Japanese version, he's the one who's sent off to there, and his role is kind of sort of the same as what Martin's is. He's there to uncover more of the mystery, give plot details to the audience and whatnot. He's the guy who kind of looks like a Japanese shemp. No, when he shows up later to give his news at the Diet Building, I just want to go. I don't know if that's offensive or not, but you know what? It's his haircut and his ears. So, and hey, Shemp is not a bad comparison, is it?
Shemp's a handsome guy.
Yeah, I didn't call him Joe Besser. So
at this point, they also talk about how they used to do sacrifices.
Yes, and that's what I was going to talk about, because we see this ceremony that is very rarely performed, and during this ceremony is when you hear the exposition about Godzilla, and that they used to send out a woman.
And it
on a raft.
And in the Japanese version, it's the old guy telling the story says it happened as recently as within his lifetime, so that's...
So this is, I think, heavily inspired by King Kong.
Yes.
Which... King Kong is one of the movies that did inspire the making of this movie.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
In the early 50s, King Kong would have been re-released for its 20th anniversary, or more or less its 20th anniversary, and not only did it kick ass in America, it did really well overseas.
We're millionaires, boys! I'll share it with all of you! Kong, the eighth wonder of the world!
And of course, our other big giant monster movie that came out that also was a huge hit was...
The Beast. The Beast. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
So huge an influence, in fact, that there are similarities between Godzilla and the Radosaurus we could point out. There are some storyboards from Godzilla where they didn't finalize the design yet, so artists would kind of just sort of picture him as they thought. Some of them drew him as kind of an oriental dragon, and some of them actually drew him quite like the Radosaurus.
I'm not familiar with this movie.
It's a Ray Harryhausen animated film with a giant dragon monster.
It basically kicked off the atomic monster thing. It's just with them, the atomic explosion was just a means of getting the monster onto the scene, whereas in Godzilla, it's so much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Returning to Odo Island, we were talking about the ceremony. I believe the old guy who was telling the story was also in Seven Samurai. There's actually quite a few actors because those productions were going on at the same time, and he was also a village elder. There's the funniest bit of dubbing in this entire movie is when they have to fit in him saying Godzilla. Because he's saying Gojira, obviously, and they just have to have this weird voice come out of nowhere going, everybody with me, Godzilla! Godzilla!
The name of this monster. Godzilla. Did you hear that? Godzilla.
And then we cut back to him, and he doesn't sound anything like that. For all intents and purposes, it was just some weirdo out in the woods just ran up behind Steve Martin, whispered Godzilla in his ear, and then just ran right off.
Okay, so
after the ceremony, we have an attack. And
yes. And I love the build-up to this attack.
The build-up is really, really good. The boy who hears something outside I believe his name is Shinkichi. And the way you would think of most monster movies, you would think the guy who runs outside to see the monster would be dead meat. And in this case, no, total opposite. His family gets killed, and Shinkichi is the one who is crying his head off outside.
Yes.
To me, I think this is probably my favorite scene of the movie.
It's really well done, and I gotta say, one of the nice touches that the American version does is Burr's narration, because he has such this heavy, commanding voice. The scene is fine in the Japanese version; it's totally fine. But for some reason, having that ending shot with Burr saying, "The natives were certain they said it was Godzilla."
Yeah, it's so good. You get the crazy change in the weather, the wind, the rain. You hear the roar. And then it goes from like this roar into people just like screaming.
Yeah, I love how the weather changes. Those weather shots are just incredible. And thinking about Godzilla in the sequels and in the American scenes here, I feel like a lot of it seems like they're shot on sets and things, but then you have the shots of the storm and you see the trees outside and you see those are real trees at exterior locations, and it just kind of adds to the budget of the movie.
Yeah.
And makes it that much better. I do love the shot also so you never see Godzilla except when the house is being torn down. You can sort of see his leg behind the house like he's walking by it, and I just love how they don't reveal him yet.
Right.
Yeah.
The whole disaster scene, and you don't see him yet.
Yeah, you don't. You just see the carnage of it, and everyone, and then the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
And Steve is still in not denial, but he's like, no one knows what caused this. And then, as you pointed out and said it so beautifully, the Islanders are like, no, we know what's up. It was Godzilla.
This is also one of those good similarities between this and King Kong. You remember in King Kong, he's referenced before he ever even shows up, and it's also it builds a lot of dread for the monster when it finally does appear.
Yeah. So they always talk about Godzilla comes from the sea. The sea makes him stronger. In the sequels, at least, they talk about that sometimes. How does he breathe underwater?
Now, this is one of the other things that is in the Japanese version, is when Dr. Yamane gives his whole exposition on Godzilla. I think in the Japanese version he theorizes that that he is a marine creature or something along the lines of a hybrid or just an intermediate life form between the two.
Yeah, in the American version they talk about how he was sort of a prehistoric animal
from the Jurassic Age.
From the Jurassic Age that sort of evolved from land to sea, or sea to land.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It makes me think, like, does Godzilla's design, does his design miss gills? Should he have gills?
The only time he's ever had gills was in Shin Godzilla, and those gills were like spurting blood the entire time. So that's not the best example to draw up. For all intents and purposes, it seems like Godzilla is just totally fine with either holding his breath forever and ever. There was one movie.
I guess there are whales. Whales don't have gills.
Yeah, but whales still need to come up and breathe. I mean,
but Godzilla comes up also. But maybe he just comes up so far deep in the ocean where no one sees him before
so far out.
Yeah. Jumping back, after the first Odo Island attack, we go to...
They take some islanders back to Tokyo.
Right. This is where Steve Martin asks Dr. Yamane's permission to come along, I think.
Yes, he takes a crew and a whole ship back to survey the island.
And I believe this is also when, in the American version, introduces us to Emiko and Ogata, who were a bit... I think they were introduced quite a bit earlier in the Japanese version. I think a lot of Ogata's backstory or his scenes were chopped down.
Yeah, they seem to be a lot closer than the last time that he saw them. It almost feels like the Japanese version, everything that we're missing is happening in tandem with what we're watching now.
And that's one of the sacrifices that the American version, one of the big things it does is it quickens the pace. And of course, quickening the pace always comes at the expense of, material has to get cut.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, we see quite a bit of Emiko and Ogata earlier in the Japanese version. And I had mentioned earlier about getting Martin's character in there and how it was more or less done with him as an observer. This is one of those tricky times where they do have to show that he had previous connections with the character, such as mentioning he had seen Emiko and Ogata before, and the fact that he's friends with Serizawa. We'll talk a bit more about that when Serizawa comes along into the plot.
Well, I do find it very interesting. It's basically how you were saying it. It's the events that happen in the Japanese version from the perspective of the American.
Yeah.
So, like, something could happen in the Japanese one that he wouldn't know anything about because he wasn't there, and those would be the cut scenes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very smart way to go with it.
Yeah, it gets. There are some points in the film where there's just simply no way to explain why Martin would be there, and that's when they resort to dubbing the most. That'll be more towards the end of the film.
Yeah, I will go back to my initial notes on this where I said that my impression was that they just shoehorn in this American actor, and it's not as abrupt as I was expecting it to be, which I find very pleasant.
Yeah.
From here, we end up seeing the footprints, these footprints that are left behind, and they are super radioactive, and they find a trilobite in one of them. I like how Steve starts to say something about them, like give a little information, and then the warning bell that
Trilobite,
Godzilla...
isn't that a clong, 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 clong?
Trilobite. Isn't that a...
So
we run up the hill.
Yes, everyone's like, run for higher ground. And you hear footsteps. So you hear those big booming footsteps. And then this might be my favorite thing ever because it's a little wonky, but it's beautiful. Godzilla's head appears on the other side of these hills.
And this is another moment. So I've ranted before about the puppet, and it's not the greatest Tsuburaya work ever. In the Japanese version, at least, those shots are, I believe it's only 2 quick shots, just him roaring, and then he kind of looks over. And in the American version, they repeat those shots quite a few times, I think just to give us more monster action, maybe.
There's still quick shots, though.
Yeah, they don't give you long enough to like really linger on how much this thing doesn't exactly match the full-body Godzilla we'll be seeing later.
And also, that wasn't the first version of that scene they filmed. Do you remember the original way they filmed that?
Was that Godzilla eating the cow? Or
Godzilla appeared with a bloody cow in his mouth, like he was just roaming the countryside, eating whatever he found. And
it's very Jurassic Park.
Yeah, and the cinematographer thought it would be too graphic, so he talked Honda, the director, into reshooting it.
Yeah, but what's also interesting about that is Godzilla eating is something we don't see in too many of his films, but that's actually kind of good because there are some monsters where the more animal-like they are, it works fine. King Kong and the Radosaurus, but as we're going to be seeing with Godzilla later on, Godzilla isn't so much a literal animal as he is to be taken as a force of nature. And I'm sure a movie about a tornado that eats people would be scary as hell, but but we're not going to do that. It's just treated more. Godzilla's treated more impersonal, which is why there's not too many Godzilla movies where Godzilla were to like single out one lone person, then just go up and mess with them. Although that'd be funny.
That's true. And I also wonder how they filmed this original version with the cow. How big was this cow?
Well, that's another question too, is the scale of it. This cow would have been the size of an elephant or something like that.
Yeah, they do talk about how big he is, which he's over 400 feet tall.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's in the American dub.
Yeah.
In the Japanese version, he's about 150 feet shorter than that.
Yeah. He's about 50 meters, I think, is what the Japanese version says he is, which is, I guess, about 150 feet.
I was reading that the reason that they chose to make him bigger in the American version was because Americans are so used to skyscrapers and these things, and the shorter buildings in Japan wouldn't make sense to him only being 250 feet.
Yeah. Oh,
but it doesn't.
Yeah, who would accept a movie where a monster has to climb up to the top of a building?
Exactly. You know what's funny, though? This reveal of Godzilla over the hill, it very much reminds me of other science fiction horror movies of the 50s for some reason. It reminds me of the appearance of the tarantula for the first time in Tarantula Over the Hill. It just seems like it takes place in the same world somehow.
Yeah. It's also a nice choice. I mean, I was talking about, cutting the shots or whatnot. It is nice that the very first moment you see the puppet, you just see sort of a glimpse of it, and then we cut away to the people's reaction, and then we cut back to, the puppet going, "Hi everyone, welcome to the Godzilla show, yay!"
That's pretty much when we were in the car. I was explaining to Robert, I'm like, Godzilla showed up and was like, "Hey guys," and then everyone started screaming, so he just started screaming back at them.
Fine! We're all raising our voices now!
Hi, over here!
So Godzilla vanishes. We see a tail trail and footprints.
I love that shot.
It's a very creepy shot. That's the thing. Is for all the complaining I've been doing about the puppet, that follow-up shot is actually very eerie.
I really did like that. It's such a good one.
And then it's time for Yamane's report, and Robert, I'm guessing you know a thing or two about dinosaurs. How many were there 2 million years ago, as he claims?
I love those slides so much.
Yeah.
Those dinosaurs
that's where they talk about him becoming a dinosaur, or that he was a prehistoric creature going from land to sea through evolution.
I don't remember if that's Zdeněk Burian's paintings or Rudolf Zillinger or one of the other great paleo artists, but those paleo artists apparently were an inspiration for Godzilla's design. I have heard that them and Charles Knight, their paintings of the Tyrannosaurus, the Iguanodon, and the Stegosaurus were sort of what ultimately combined into Godzilla.
I read that too. Basically, the body shape of a T-Rex, the pose of the Iguanodon, and the spikes of the Stegosaurus.
Okay. That's awesome. So here he goes into explaining everything, the size, how he was created, and probably how he showed up. And he says that he was probably resurrected by repeated experiments being run of the H-bomb
testings and strontium-90. And this is one of the things where you got to give the American version credit that they didn't pave over any of that stuff. You could have really imagined that some studios would have felt kind of antsy and they would have just changed the dialogue or the dubbing, but no, they keep it intact.
They keep it intact. I mean, they do cut out some talk about it, but there had been rumors all the time that the Japanese version was very anti-American, but that's not true.
Well, around this point in the film, there are some of the cutscenes you would have. There's a cutscene on a bus where the pedestrians are reading the news about the radioactivity and the stuff like that, and then they're just through casual conversation, one of them says, "Oh no, are we gonna have to go back to the bomb shelters again? I hate that." And of course, that's something that would not only would it not have been too relevant for American audiences, but it's also, it cuts away from the action. So, I understand why they cut it, but at the same time, it also cuts out a bit of what Godzilla and his relevance is to the Japanese as opposed to...
Well, things like that also apparently were cut, bomb shelters, things like that, because it also brought up memories of World War II.
Yeah, it's a tricky topic, and that's the thing is, for all intents and purposes, this podcast is about the monster movies, but the world relations between Japan and America, that's a podcast for somebody else with a lot more time on their hands and a lot more educated than I am, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But I think...
But World War II was freshly in people's minds.
Yeah,
and
this was still less than 10 years... Wait. Yes, less than Gojira would have been 54, so that would have been less than a decade after.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
So just bringing up those type of memories was something that had to really be thought about. And, obviously certain cuts were made from the Japanese version to the American one. Also, you got to think that, Japan was an enemy to lots of people who still held those grudges from World War II. So because Godzilla was very popular throughout the world, but lots of the time it got its world notoriety from the American version. That's the one that was released throughout because even though America was probably, the enemy of a lot of people as well at the time, but the American version, I guess it was more sensitive, maybe?
I don't know about more sensitive. It's just, it doesn't delve into the politics as much. And that's the hardest thing to translate across seas is just, we were saying what this film meant to the Japanese as opposed to what it meant to people who hadn't experienced having to go to the bomb shelters and stuff like that.
So from here, Steve ends up calling George in Chicago. I really do like that he called it something big and terrible.
Now let's have it, Steve. What about this monster story of yours?
Well, it's big and terrible.
So apparently Steve Martin didn't listen to those screaming politicians about whether or not this could be kept a secret. He's like, screw that. I'm Raymond Burr. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
He just gets on the phone and says, oh, yeah, we also have all these fascinating political secrets and scandalous photos of the emperor. Why don't we go ahead and share those with the world? I don't care what they think.
So he talks about that there are plans to bomb the area where Godzilla is, and he calls them death bombs.
The question is, will they kill him? They say they're going to find it with sonar.
And then from here I said eye patch guy, because we are introduced to Dr.
Serizawa. Serizawa is kept sort of a mystery in the Japanese version up until the parts where we really need to start knowing about him. And I think this is Steve Martin interacting with the original Japanese characters is fine with me, body doubles aside, but this is one instance where it's a little hard to imagine that Martin and Serizawa would have been friends. First of all, Serizawa is much younger than Martin. I don't remember if they said I don't think they said they were college friends, but they're somehow friends.
Okay.
But in the Japanese version as well, you get the impression that Serizawa doesn't really have too many human interactions. He works alone in this laboratory.
I got that impression in the American one, too.
He's very awkward. There are scenes of him earlier with Emiko where there's just not much of a connection. There's a scene where Hagiwara is interviewing him and just sort of throwing anything his way that'll get him to talk, and Serizawa is just a little bit baffled by everything. I wouldn't say he's a shut-in, but you get the impression that this is a guy who just commits himself to science, and the reason why he does that we'll talk about later on when he has this big exposition scene. So why and how he knows Martin, why and how Martin would have been familiar with Emiko and Ogata, that's very tricky stuff. And again, this is all the more reason why Martin is best seen as an observer than rather as a character who needs to be integral to the plot.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part.
Yeah, super agreed. So earlier they had mentioned that Emiko has potentially this love triangle situation.
Yes.
And this completes the triangle.
Yeah, Emiko and Serizawa had been arranged to be married when they were children. I believe that's the story they give.
Yeah.
And just Emiko is not a shut-in like Serizawa. She goes out and sees the world. She sees this hot young piece of sailor ass named Ogata.
So Dr. say his name again?
Serizawa.
Which I tried to spell it out phonetically how I heard it.
You're basically the Steve Martin of this podcast.
You are the Steve Martin of this podcast.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody out there knows what I look like. I guess I do. I kind of look like Martin, only less. Do I look like? I guess I kind of look like Raymond Burr, only.
Your eyes aren't all.
I don't own a vineyard, and he was Canadian, I think, also too. So last time I checked, I was not Canadian born.
He has haunting eyes.
It's hard to imagine, like, any of the other American actors who were shoehorned into these movies, whether or not they probably couldn't have pulled it off. And Raymond Burr matched the tone of this movie perfectly, as that he does not goof off at any point. Even when he's making the little jokes like saying, my Japanese is a bit rusty, or that guy's been having too much sake, it's still delivered with this almost mirthless kind of humor, too, where you can believe he's a world-weary guy.
Yeah. So Emiko's shown the laboratory, and we see this tank full of fish, like this murky tank full of fish. And then we see him just kind of drop in a little bloop, a little like pill or something. And then I really like that you don't see what's happening. It's just their faces, and she gives out the most blood-curdling scream.
the music that builds up to it.
Yes.
We were talking about earlier about how not seeing Godzilla was actually, one of the spooky things about the starting earlier. Not seeing what exactly this... Spoilers, it's the oxygen destroyer. Not seeing what it does at first, but just hearing those strings going nuts and then that big boom right at the end to coincide with her scream.
Well, you really wonder what she's saying. Because at this point, you don't know if the doctor is a crazy guy.
That's true.
You don't know if he's going to be a savior. Like, maybe he's creating like little mini Godzillas.
I think
what I thought.
The first time he's seen in the Japanese version is during the first expedition to Odo Island. He doesn't accompany it, but he's just seen on the docks wearing sunglasses and a black cape or just black outfit, and you don't know who he is at that point.
Do we ever find out why he has one eye?
It's been theorized that the reason he has one eye is he might have lost it in World War II, which of course would have a big explanation for the reasons behind not wanting to reveal the oxygen destroyer. That's getting ahead of ourselves, but we'll talk a bit more because Serizawa's big moment is we'll see towards the end.
He's so good. He's so good. So here we see the death bombing, the effort to kill Godzilla. Amiko's dad, who's a paleontologist, I don't remember his name.
Dr. Yamane.
Thank you. He laments killing Godzilla.
Yeah.
And he thinks that he should be studied, that he should not be killed. And he's just so sad.
Yeah, we'll be hearing that quite a bit during the film. And, one of the... Aside from the fact that Godzilla is obviously just a one-of-a-kind animal, they'll go on to explain later one of Yamane's interests in is the fact that a life form has endured and survived radioactive poisoning, and whether or not that could be an ability that could be grafted to human beings. So there is an altruistic streak in him wanting to keep Godzilla alive, even by the point where Godzilla has obviously been killing lots and lots and lots of people. It's like, well, is it worth that science grant to keep him alive and look at him while he's burning people alive? I don't know. There's no solid answers in this movie. There's only lots and lots of questions and viewpoints, and that's actually one of its strengths. So.
Yeah. So after the bombing, everyone in Tokyo is celebrating. They all assume that they have killed off Godzilla. And then Godzilla sinks a ship. And one of my major notes for this is that the music is so good.
Yeah.
And this is when I really, really, really caught on to the music, where I was just like...
Ifukube's music is such an important part of Godzilla in general that I think, even to this day, a lot of his themes are brought up again and again in the films. Yeah.
Did you ever see Cloverfield?
Yeah.
There's only music at the end of it.
Yeah. Both Cloverfield and Pacific Rim did have scores that were very much in Ifukube's vein, and that's how big of a stamp he left on the genre.
Yeah. I will say Roar, which is the end song to Cloverfield, is so good. And that's what Michael Giacchino is like, I want this to be the US version of Godzilla, and I'm like, this is just like a Godzilla theme. Yeah. I love it so much.
And when you mention Roar right now, Ifukube also made the monsters roar, I believe.
Yes, it did.
From the story, it was a leather glove rubbed against a contrabass and then played backwards or something like that.
Wow.
And I don't know where he would have gotten the idea that if you rub a leather glove, you can get a scary-ass monster sound.
Just musical instruments and then reverberated. I saw there's a rumor that the reverberation was from the audio bouncing back in a toilet.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true.
Who doesn't make great discoveries when they're on the toilet? I mean,
so, Japanese celebration. Godzilla shows up, sinks some ships. Shink some ships. And military is just deployed because Tokyo is in the harbor or the bay and is about to enter the city.
Yeah, and when the military appears, it has become such a cliche with Godzilla movies, and this is obviously the first time they did it, and it's great, and it's actual footage of the real Japanese Defense Force.
I was going to ask because it's so good, and I was like, there's something that changes about how it's shot. There's something...
The actual director, Ishido Honda, he just, I guess, grabbed a camera when they were on the move doing it.
Guerrilla style, I guess.
I would assume so. So maybe that's...
Or Godzilla style.
It might look different because he only had one shot. It didn't set up anything.
It's very effective, though. And it just shows that they're really putting everything they have forth.
The attack on the harbor is really well done because this is the first time we see full-body Godzilla. And... there are some shots of him that are very creepy because he's almost a silhouette, because it's a nighttime attack, so obviously there's not too much light on him, but there's a couple of shots of him just sort of with people running in the foreground.
Yeah.
One of the things that makes Godzilla really effective in this movie is you really get a sense of mass with him because the film was sped up so quickly so that he would appear to move very, very slow. And this is obviously later on in the series when he has to do stuff like fight monsters. You can't have that kind of luxury of making him move, almost like a living glacier. But in this film, it's just that sense of the slower he goes, it's actually really creepy. That's the thing too. It's like
and they do that a lot in giant monster movies. They slow it down. Even like a Jurassic Park, the T-Rex, like in the final shot, sort of looks like he's slow motion. It just adds weight and power to the character.
That's the thing. It really hides the fact that it's a guy. But again, Dread is such a big part of this film, and Dread doesn't move at like lightning fast speeds. Dread is something that creeps up on you, and you can't get away from it. So and you really get a sense of that during the harbor attack. This is the scene, I believe, where Godzilla picks up the train, and that's a very famous reference. Once again, our friend the puppet. But aside from it's still creepy. It's still something that another King Kong callback where the subway being smashed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a nicely done scene, and the other good thing about it is it's relatively short because they save a lot of the Godzilla action for the main attack on Tokyo later. So this is once again sort of another teaser, but we're not teasing us as much as we were with the Odo Island or whatnot. They know enough to give us a little bit more each time until we get to...
Yes, when everything goes like super bonkers. He eats the train, he steps on it, and then like it appears that he just like leaves.
For all intents and purposes, it just he leaves. Yeah, so
I like when he just kind of shows up, does some stuff, and then pieces out.
Yeah, we had talked. We were saying a little bit earlier how he's more like a force of nature than an animal. And when you look at Godzilla from like animal motivations, it doesn't make much sense. Why he comes ashore, why he smashes stuff, why he suddenly decides to take off.
Well, I will say him being a force of nature also makes that original attack, the storm scene, so much more effective because he himself is the storm.
He is the storm. Yeah.
Would have been nice if they had some sort of storm follow him throughout each attack or some sort of different event.
Oh, if like Tokyo experienced the same thing.
Yeah, but I guess just like the whole city at the end is on fire. That's another type of...
That's also a storm in and of itself.
Yeah. They make a reference that the city is protected by 3,000 volt towers, and it's just like lines of these towers.
This is the start of the second attack.
So Godzilla shows up, busts through everything, and just wreaks havoc on the city. Yeah. And then this is where we get a lot more of this wonderful model work with people being deployed and intercutting between people and these wonderful shots of the models of like cars or trucks being flipped over. And we have the scene with the mother with the 3 kids. Yeah. It's such a good...
It's a very solid attack, and the thing about this attack is you're not entirely sure how you should feel, because there's a lot of monster movies where we love seeing the monster just going and kicking ass and tearing stuff down, and it's always fun to watch. It's nice seeing King Kong grab that one airplane and saying, "Ha, take that!" even though you totally forgot that King Kong was being a very bad boy earlier on. When you're watching Godzilla attack here, it's a little hard to say if, there are parts where the destruction is fun to watch, and there are parts where you feel bad about yourself when they cut to stuff like people genuinely suffering.
I don't think this movie is really about the fun of the attacks because he is just such a scary presence.
And they did try to get people out of the city.
In the final shot or in the final battle, they keep cutting back to that same wide shot where the streets are bare.
With that said, it's still a masterfully done scene. That it's a really good monster rampage for whatever purposes you get out of it. If it makes you afraid, if it makes you concerned, or even if you, for some reason, you do find it fun, it's still very well done. That's the thing. It's solid. It's a solid rampage.
And if it were bad, it would be a liquid rampage.
Womp womp, or a gaseous one. Godzilla fart! I think this is the first scene in the film where we do see Godzilla use his atomic breath.
Yes,
that's right.
I mean, technically, yes, those boats out at sea were blown up by him, but this is the first time we actually see it.
Yep,
so.
we see him go through the motions.
So I wonder, the people that know about Godzilla on the island, the people that are investigating him, do they know about his atomic breath at this point, or is this a big reveal to them?
They know that they know about the sea of fire and the flashes of white light. So.
Right.
But I guess up until that point, he hasn't used it. He did not use his atomic breath during the harbor scene. I don't believe.
No, You only see you only see the aftermath of his attacks.
I think they're able to make the connection when Dr. Yamane was pointing out earlier the strontium-90 inside Godzilla's footprint and saying he's a radioactive creature. I guess that's where they can kind of piece it together. But I don't think they know at this point that he's capable of, blasting a street into a jillion pieces.
It would have been nice to have a scene of a reaction of his fire, like they do in the 2014 version. Like, what the hell's going on? He breathes fire.
And then the military attacks him.
Yeah.
And they fail.
And by the way, with his breathing of fire, since I was a kid, my favorite thing are his glowing spikes.
Yeah. It's a nice touch. It's a really nice touch.
Yeah. It feels like he powers up.
It's one of those great touches, yeah. We have Steve Martin getting his first eye-to-eye encounter, and this is a very well done in American cutting in, because I think it's one of those parts where it really does feel like it was almost made specifically for the film. It's just how well that's cut in between of him gazing up, and this is where you really got to give Raymond Burr credit too for giving a lot of credibility to the scene too, because he looks friggin' terrified.
So this is the shot where he's holding the recorder.
Yeah.
And it's just a slow push it on his... He's just looking out.
This is it, George.
It's like the classic...
Steve Martin signing off from Tokyo Bay, and then...
Yeah. It's the classic Spielberg shot. Oh, I just want to talk a little bit more about the final attack. All the fire effects are so good in this.
They are.
Like, when you see just on the horizon fire...
that skyline of fire is really well done. And I'm sure some people nitpick and saying, why is it only the buildings over there that are on fire, not the ones in the foreground? Well, it's okay. Nobody's perfect, and it's still a nice silhouette. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's shot so great.
It is.
Seamless.
This is one of the few Godzilla movies that really gives time spent to the destruction that the monster had caused when the monster's not on the scene anymore. And those shots of the city on fire are still, they really get you.
Yeah.
Now, following that, we have the jet fighters come in. A lot of Godzilla fans interpret that as they didn't chase him away, that he would have just left on his own anyway, but after that, Godzilla is taken off, and we cut to the following morning, where in the American version, this is where we came in, as they would say back in the day.
Yes.
By the way, that phrase, "this is where we came in,"
yeah,
that's what Jiminy Cricket says at the end of Pinocchio. He says, "Well, this is practically where I came in."
Well, this was back in the days when you could go sit and you could watch the same movie all damn day long if you felt like it. So
yeah, but I always loved that line from Jiminy Cricket. In fact, when I was a kid, every time I'd go to a Mexican restaurant.
Oh boy. You would look for him in your food?
No.
Possibly be going.
I'd be eating the chips and salsa. And I would eat the food, and then after I would eat my meal, I'd go back to eating the chips and salsa, and I would say to my parents, "Well, this is practically where I came in."
Oh my gosh! So you were 100 when you were 5. So here's where we get we don't deal with Steve Martin. He's not really being seen, and we get in a lot of stuff that is filled in that he kind of talks about earlier on.
Yeah.
And so from here...
This is Emiko relaying about what she had seen with Serizawa. This is where we actually see what he's been working on all this time.
Yes.
And I'm assuming everybody has watched the movie. This is where we finally see what Serizawa's created, and it's called the Oxygen Destroyer, and basically... anything living goes kablooey.
Yes.
When this is put in.
Basically, they deteriorate and become skeletons.
Yeah, it's a creepy visual. And that's the thing too. Again, it's not like animated or whatnot, but just with those simple cuts and dissolves, and with that music played, the music fills in so much of it too. And that's the thing is, it fills you with that dread. And at this point, this is where Emiko has to break her promise to Serizawa about not revealing the Oxygen Destroyer. And now, why he has not wanted her to tell about it? This is where we go to I believe our next scene is. Without Steve, and this is where we have really that love triangle paying off.
Yes.
With Emiko, Ogata, and Serizawa. Now, Serizawa, there's enough left of his explanation in the American version as to why he doesn't want the Oxygen Destroyer known, is because, at this point, the Oxygen Destroyer has no purpose other than just killing everything. And in the Japanese version, he explains a little bit more just about, even if he were to keep it a secret, somebody could find out about this. He says he's only human, and if a hostile power were to torture him, he would reveal the secrets. This is also a very telling point, too, where he says to Emiko he had made arrangements, even at this point in his life, that if he were to die, he wanted all of his notes burned. This explains something towards the end of the scene in the American version that doesn't make too much sense, where once those notes start burning, she starts crying hysterically. And people might be wondering, well, why is she crying? It's because I think at that point, based on what he had said, it's very clear that he's not getting out of this alive.
Okay.
And that's why it's it's one of those little touches that it's sad that it got cut out, but again, I think it was cut out for pacing purposes.
Yeah.
So.
But I think it would have been a little bit more powerful.
It would have been.
Yeah, it would have been really, because it's just a little weird to have her crying.
Yeah.
But I also feel like they all feel the gravity of using this technology and understand his hesitancy to even put it out there in the public.
There's no solid answers. It's just viewpoints, and that's Serizawa's viewpoints in the Japanese version, especially for a character we had spent so much of the film not really knowing anything about and finding out that he has, great love for humanity and also just, not wanting to contribute to its downfall. Now, I had mentioned about editing out for pacing, that it comes to this very poignant scene where about the children's choir. I do have to confess, when I was a kid, I always wondered why the scene was in there and why it goes on so long. But you do have to give the American version credit that they did not chop it down. They left it in there because this is, number one, plot-wise, it's important because this is what convinces Serizawa that it's time to take action. But number two, it's just a very moving scene. And we had talked about feeling the dread of this movie, but this is a different feeling altogether, and this is just feeling, I don't know what you would call it, mourning or even hope, or maybe a little bit of everything put together. It's
just humanity.
Humanity, yeah. This movie spends a lot of time showing the human aftermath to Godzilla's attack, and it's hard to watch.
So, right before this, Ogata and
Serizawa
had gotten into a fight.
Right.
And Ogata got hurt, and he sees how Emiko
runs to him instead. Yeah. Now,
and you can kind of see that he seems a little thrown back, and it's the only time that he really shows any emotion.
There had not really been any romantic feelings whatsoever. And again, Serizawa was such a character who was kept very much mystery shrouded up to that point. You don't know how he's going to react, if he really was in love with Emiko, or if he's just seeing the world moving on without him and just seeing love blossoming. But it's not something that he's going to be able to enjoy. It's open to a lot of interpretation. Serizawa is just a very complicated character, but that's one of the strengths of this movie, is just that. Yeah. He could have just been the random scientist who came up with the magic weapon that kills the monster. Yeah, but instead they took the route of humanity, as you had put it.
And his eyeball.
And his eyeball. There we go.
As we mentioned before with the love triangle thing, I'm glad that this one does have a payoff, does have substance to it. There is something there. Yeah.
Hey, Robert, you could say Serizawa was keeping an eye out for them.
Oh, my God.
He was trying to patch their relationship.
Yeah. He never took on any students because he didn't have that many pupils.
It's too much.
Okay, back to humanity and pathos and good stuff. So, Serizawa burns his notes.
He burns them.
So... Now you guys all know why Emiko starts bawling.
Yeah, I really wish they had kept that in. Just that little bit more exposition. So everyone gets on some ships. They go out to where Godzilla is, and Ogata and Serizawa dive in. They volunteer and they go down there.
Yeah. This is a little longer in the Japanese version, where Serizawa had wanted to go down alone first, and Ogata wanted to go down alone because he's an experienced mariner. And in the end, the sort of compromise they make is that they're both going to go down there. Serizawa says that he's the only one who knows how to activate the destroyer, but that's also a bit of foreshadowing, too, of why he's so demanding that he should be the only one to go down.
Okay. So
they dive down.
This
is an interesting scene because this is the first and only time in the film we more or less see Godzilla at peace.
He's sleeping.
It's... For however much pathos you want to give to a monster who has just killed everybody and whatnot, why we should feel sorry for him, it's hard to say, but for some reason you just see him when he's resting down there. In the end, Godzilla is just as much of a victim of the radioactivity as the humans are too. That's
Yeah, I mean, I must say, I don't know if it's just because I'm a fan of these monster movies or what, but I really do feel sad for him at the end of the movie.
There's a nice touch with Godzilla's. So a really quick little tangent is when they were developing the look of Godzilla, they had given him like several different kinds of skin textures. One of them was like a toad, one of them's like an alligator. The skin texture of Godzilla in the final movie is made to resemble scar tissue, which is they wanted to give the impression that this was an animal that had survived a horrible burning. Yeah, this is still, again, Godzilla is also just as much of a victim himself as the people are. He just happens to take more people down with him. And speaking of taking people down with him, that's exactly what's going on, where we have Ogata and Serizawa dive down.
And they are walking around. There's something a little choppy about the way that this is presented, but you see them get to where they need to get to, and then Ogata starts going back up.
It starts ascending like they were supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think, is he screaming Godzilla?
He's screaming Serizawa because Serizawa's not surfacing like he's supposed to be. The plan had been, activate the oxygen destroyer, put it down, get the hell out of there. And Serizawa is not taking the line back up.
Okay.
And when he's shouting Serizawa, he's like, dude, get out of there, what are you thinking? And Serizawa, he knows what he's thinking.
Yeah.
He's made that decision already. And
he
that decision
activates it, and he cuts his rope, and he cuts his oxygen tube.
And his last words to Emiko, his last words to, Ogata, it's working, live happily with Emiko. So that's also that humanity, as, he may not have found love himself, but he still wants people to be happy, even if he has to sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
So,
and this whole sequence, it's underwater, and, it was shot, as they say, dry for wet. Where they really weren't underwater, and in between the action and the camera was an aquarium to give the illusion
that's great. Underwater. I think it was really great. You do see, so when you see Godzilla roaring in pain near the surface, is that also the puppet?
That's the puppet, and it's the puppet's big scene. And I guess in this case, the puppet works fine until it does its final little bounce up in the water, and that's where it's a little obvious it's the puppet. It works really well, though, when Godzilla comes up and makes that one last roar of god-awful agony. And this is actually a nice moment from Raymond Burr, too, is just a silent reaction where he's just... That look on his face is also... can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, but this is still a scene that really hits everybody. Because you don't know whether or not, is Godzilla going to come up and destroy everybody? Even if Godzilla is doomed himself? Should we feel sorry for him? And in the end, I can't imagine anybody would be watching this film and not feeling something for him. And not just because it's a given, because we love monsters and we're monster kids, but also because the scene is treated with the same amount of gravity and
the music
seriousness.
Helps too.
The music absolutely helps too, yeah.
That music is intense. And then we see the skeleton of Godzilla at the ocean floor.
Which, that is so neat, seeing his skeleton.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it so much.
I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore, but if that were on display somewhere, I would freak out. I would love to see it.
As far as I can tell, the only prop that exists from this film is the oxygen destroyer itself.
Oh, wow.
Godzilla suits were not made to last, but that's a whole other topic.
But yeah, and then, typical fashion of everything we've been watching lately... It just says the end.
Well, not quite. There's one last final difference between the American and the Japanese one. Dr. Yamane, we don't see much of him in the American cut on that ship, other than him just looking sad over Serizawa's death. In the Japanese version, Yamane points out that Godzilla may not have been one of a kind, which of course is absolutely true, but it ends on the note saying, if we continue nuclear bombing testings, there could very well be another Godzilla. Now, whether or not you think that's just setting up a sequel, or whether or not that's an actual plea to the audience, just saying you guys might want to think about what you're doing. It's left as an open question or an open statement, but it gives you something to think about. Now, I have heard people complaining about Raymond Burr's final line where he's saying the world could wake up and live again. Some people think that that's saying, okay, we should forget everything we've seen before, but I like that line. I think it does go back to what we were saying about the humanity of how do you interpret the scene of the children's choir and whatnot, and just saying, how can we move beyond this terrible thing while still remembering it and making sure we don't do it again.
Well, yeah, you have to move on. You have to live your life.
You do.
The menace was gone, so was a great man. But the whole world could wake up and live again.
I just really kind of feel like seeing the destruction, lingering on the destruction after the final words are said, with maybe the end going over that or something, would have been a little bit more of a satisfying ending for myself. So just like maybe, or like underwater, just that shot that we see of Godzilla skeleton, seeing that after he says everything, you go back into the water. And if that would have been the last shot, I think I would have found it a little less jarring. But, you know, it is what it is.
Well, you know, I was reading also that there was supposed to be a shot of the helicopter flying over the ocean at the end, and they throw a wreath into the ocean.
For Sarazawa.
I guess they didn't shoot it, but that was an idea for the ending. But I think I think what we have gave the impression enough where you don't need it.
Yeah, the wreath thing would almost imply that they knew he was gonna die.
Yeah, they just kept a wreath on.
yeah, or it was Christmas time, and we're like, you know what, you love Christmas so much, take it, whoosh.
But yeah, so that's Godzilla.
Yeah,
Godzilla,
so
King of the Monsters.
So did you like the movie, Anthea?
Yes, I did.
I know we were talking a little bit earlier that it felt a little slow.
It did. There was a little too much exposition, or like where they would be speaking in Japanese and then the translation of what was happening would not come in until they were almost done saying what they had to say.
Yeah.
So some parts are a little, I'm just like, okay, let's speed this up. But overall, I really do enjoy this movie. And then as we talk about it, I really enjoy the movie more.
Yeah, the more
like
you think
the conversations that we've been having, like I'm just like, this is such a good movie, so solid.
The more you think about it and the backstory and what it symbolizes, the more one enjoys it, I feel. As a kid, all I want to see is Godzilla fighting and monsters fighting, and I never cared about the human characters. This one, I will say, out of all the Godzilla movies I've seen, this is the one that I care the most about the human characters. Or Godzilla's Revenge. I love Ichiro. But I didn't really care about the human characters, and all I wanted to see was the Godzilla fights, which meant as a kid I was bored by lots of these movies because I only wanted to get to the fighting scenes.
This movie is so much more different than anything else, than all the other ones.
Right.
And this one, I don't think I can tell you that I cared about any one person in particular, but I did care for the well-being of Tokyo as a whole, and seeing everything being destroyed was very
I think a big part of that is the fact that this movie does not have a villain, and it didn't need one. It would have been very easy to have just made some scumbag character who was the cause of making Godzilla attack on the scene in the first place, and then killing him off, and the audience walk away thinking, okay, good, that douche deserved it. Yeah, but I mean, it's all about conflicting viewpoints, and you feel good and bad for a lot of characters in this movie. That's the thing, is that they're, in the end, what is the villain of this movie? Is it mankind's ignorance? Is it just the existence of these killer weapons in general? Is it just a force of nature that we're never going to stop?
Or is it a giant dinosaur that breathes
Or is it
fire?
a giant dinosaur breathes fire? Is the giant dinosaur breathes fire? Is he the villain? Is he the victim? Is he both? Is he something you can even measure in terms of human sympathy? Or would you feel just as sorry for him as he'd feel for an earthquake or a tsunami? Yeah. But the fact that the movie raises those questions and has those different viewpoints is a big part of its power, and the fact that they treated it so seriously. I mean, should we talk now about the Americanization of it? And
go for it. Yeah.
I really, really like the Americanization of this movie. And, even if a lot of the changes were made for pacing purposes, if you thought this version moves slow, Gojira moves much, much slower.
Oh, well, okay.
But the fact is, I thought it was a very clever adaptation. I thought inserting your American actor as an observer was also a very clever way of keeping a lot of the original film intact, even if you did have to make those edits.
Yeah.
And in the end, it respected the tone. And I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, there's no better way for me to sum up how good the Americanization is of Godzilla than to point out some of the Kaiju films where the Americanization was terrible, and look no further than the very first Godzilla sequel, which we knew in Japan as Gojira no Gyakushu, which came out pretty quickly to capitalize on the success. When it came to America, it finally came out as something called Gigantus the Fire Monster. Why it was called that, who knows? But if you've ever seen the American cut of what this movie is, it is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah,
just
Godzilla Raids Again, eventually.
Godzilla Raids Again, which is it's the title it eventually is known as, which is a terrible pun. Yeah, the Lone Ranger rides again. Da, 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 da. I think that's what that title's supposed to imply. But when you see,
I never thought about that, actually.
When you see how sloppy that movie is, how badly scenes are cut, how much stock footage is put in, how much, for some reason, Godzilla and Anguirus have their roars switched for no real reason. It's just, you wonder, is it incompetence? Is it laziness? And that's when all the more reason you appreciate how much care they put into Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yeah. Now, I always called him Angulus.
You can call it Anguirus or Angulus is fine. I mean, in Americanizations, they spell his name as Anguirus, which makes people think his name is Anguirus, but...
Right. I always know it with an L in there. Angulus.
Yeah.
And all these monsters, there's so many ways you could pronounce their names. Yeah. But apparently, Angulus was an early option for Godzilla's name.
There's a lot of early Godzilla designs we can talk about, even before he was a dinosaur, necessarily. Yeah. I'm not sure if Anguirus... It's possible. Anguirus was an early enough kaiju in the series that I wouldn't be surprised if he had been one of the concepts for Godzilla. I'm not entirely sure about that, and I've never read any clarification. But there was a lot of talk about what Godzilla was going to look like in advance. Tsuburaya had wanted Godzilla to be an octopus because...
Yep, I read that.
Yeah, he just was big on octopi. But one other early Godzilla design that's interesting to point out was, I had mentioned earlier in storyboards that there are some versions of Godzilla that resembled a dragon or a Radosaurus. There was a very strange concept where Godzilla's head almost resembled a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing to think about. And of course, Tsuburaya would make a mushroom monster later with Matango. But it was all part of that metaphor of Godzilla as the bomb, as if Godzilla actually sort of resembled the aftermath of one. And it's kind of strange to think of what he would look like exactly. Maybe it would have worked, maybe not. I like his design as it is now, so I'm not going to complain.
I mean, it's a great design. But I also wanted to mention the name Godzilla. What are the Japanese words for Godzilla? It's two words combined.
Gojira is a combination of Gorira and Kujira. Gorira is gorilla, Kujira is whale.
Yeah, gorilla whale.
Now, let's talk about the fun little anecdote story. Now, apparently... the name Gojira came about with some stagehands were saying that there's a really, really fat guy working at Toho. He's as big as a Gorira. No, he's as big as a Kujira. He's as big as a Gojira. That name's clever. Let's keep it.
Yeah, and the story goes back and forth, whether it's a stagehand, someone in the publicity department.
And nobody has ever been able to find this guy, which leads people to think it was not true. Kimi Honda, who is the wife of Ishiro Honda, says she does not believe a word of that story.
Yeah. Well, she also says they are known for having tall tails.
Yeah,
so.
But it's a fun little story to pass around.
Well, there's also a rumor, which lots of people don't believe, of an early pre-production meeting where they were on top of a skyscraper. So apparently there's a rumor that the director, Ishiro Honda, and Eiji Tsuburaya, the special effects director, that they went on an observation deck on one of the tallest skyscrapers in Japan and were
planning out where
the route of Godzilla's destruction. Mm-hmm. People overheard them and were freaking out, and then police came and had to interrogate them.
Like they were planning on saying, okay, we're gonna blow up the Diet building next, then we're gonna smash the I mean, whether or not it's true, who knows? But it's a funny little story. So yeah.
With the history of Godzilla, as we said before, it was inspired by King Kong and 20,000 Fathom, or I keep saying 20,000. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Mm-hmm. I think I'm getting it mixed up with 20 Million Miles to Earth.
Yeah, that's because you have 20/20 vision.
Yeah.
I'm going to hell for that one.
Yes, you are.
God. Okay.
Who did they get to play Godzilla?
Godzilla was played by a stuntman named Haruo Nakajima, who had a very brief role in Seven Samurai, so brief, in fact, that I don't think I've ever even spotted him. Nakajima played Godzilla for 12 movies, I believe, I want to say up until Godzilla vs. Gigan. He played numerous other Toho monsters. He was Rodan, he was Gaira, he was King Kong for King Kong Escapes. Uh-huh. He was the one and only time Mothra was ever played by someone in a suit was in the original Mothra, and there was actually quite a few people inside this big Mothra caterpillar suit, but I guess he wasn't the head of it. He was, I think he was Mogera, the burrowing robot from Mysterians. He was probably Magma the Walrus from Gorath. He played a griffin in Latitude Zero. He was probably a mushroom man in Matango. I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't be surprised. And
so he's in a lot of Toho movies playing monsters.
A lot of he's probably one of the best monster suit actors of all time, because not it's hard to act in those suits, especially in Godzilla King of the Monsters, where I've heard a lot of conflicting reports about how much that suit weighed. The earliest designs, I think, were in excess of 200, 300 pounds, but even the final version that shows up in the film, that thing must have weighed a ton.
I heard that it weighed a little over 200 pounds. It was 6'5", and the guy wasn't 6'5". In fact, he said that for the first movie, that was the only time they built the suit without thinking of who was going to be playing the monster.
Yeah, they just needed someone who's strong enough to lift the damn thing.
Right, so he's in there, and he can turn his head all the way around, and it won't turn the Godzilla head because there's so much space in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the bulkiness of that costume is very obvious in the film, and again, adding to that feeling of mass, it works fine but by the very next movie, it was time to get Godzilla to really move and fight. And
but he did take his role very seriously as Godzilla. He went to the zoo and studied elephants and
bears,
monkeys and
gorillas and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, as the series went along, he does start acting a bit too. There are nice little touches. There's the character of Godzilla starts to come out probably around the time of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster.
He was told by Tsuburaya to watch King Kong. He should study that for his performance.
Tsuburaya was very, very much influenced by King Kong, to the point where, I mean, that's probably what got him into monsters. It's no surprise he wanted the movie stop animated, but that would have taken years and a budget that wouldn't have covered it.
If they did this in stop motion, it would take 5 to 7 years to make the movie with a huge budget.
Okay.
But they needed the movie done like in 3 months.
Yeah.
So.
But, it was a blessing in disguise, because Tsuburaya made an entire career out of suitmation, and that's a big part of what gave the tokusatsu genre its identity, was the suits, was the miniatures, and the fact that, out of necessity, we ended up with this whole art style that can be appreciated by monster fans for decades to come.
Yeah, of course. Apparently, at least once, he passed out in the suit from heat exhaustion.
Oh, yeah. It was a dangerous job. Yeah. Being a monster suit actor, especially in those days when the suits were gigantic, there were a lot of... There's 2 stories in particular about how much hell Nakajima endured. Mm-hmm. One of them is for Rodan, when he's in the suit. The wires supporting Rodan broke and he fell. Now, how far he fell depends on the story. I've heard he fell 10 feet. I've heard he fell 20 feet. Uh-huh. But that's still really painful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other painful story was in Varan the Unbelievable, where he's playing the monster Varan, and an explosive went off underneath him while he's crawling on all fours to play a quadrupedal monster. Yeah. And it blew up somewhere around his crotch. And...
Yeah, apparently he has battle scars.
Yeah, he passed away just a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, but he was...
I did get to meet him at Monsterpalooza.
Same here. I gave him a Rodan sketch. He was super nice. That's the thing, is he appreciated, that's the thing, is Godzilla was embraced the world over, and I think a lot of those creators and those actors were loved very much too.
You see, the thing that I really loved about him was, in terms of seeing him at Monsterpalooza, was I don't really do the autograph thing at conventions.
Yeah, neither do I.
It's like I want to have like a personal experience with these people if that happens. Yeah. And I also, they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Well, he was one. I was like, the original Godzilla for 12 movies. I want to meet him. You know, he charged a reasonable price, but he also donated all the money to the tsunami victims.
Hey.
So it's like, how can you not meet him?
Of course.
Yeah, so also, with the costume, this particular one apparently had 3 cables coming out of it in the back. 2 that would control the eyes, 1 that controls the mouth. Mm-hmm. And I did notice the mouth movements of this one was pretty impressive. Lots of...
When it's not our friend the puppet.
Yes.
I keep harping, it's a running... We'll make that a running gag, but it makes you appreciate the suit all that much more. Because the suit is quite a piece of work.
The way the suit worked in terms of the head looked really good. Mm-hmm. Now this Godzilla also has ears, which eventually he loses, and then he gets them back.
Yeah, the number of toes changes, minor little things like that. He He has a very mammal-like design for the first two movies, and then by King Kong vs. Godzilla, where his main opponent is a mammal, that's where they really made him more reptilian.
Well, apparently with Godzilla, the ear discussion is interesting also because when they wrote the script for Godzilla, he was not described at all because they didn't have his final look at the time. But one thing they did mention was his ears.
Oh.
They mentioned, it was just like a quick in passing, not in terms of the way they looked so much, but it was more, they mentioned Godzilla or the monster. Here's the clock tower.
Oh.
And they mentioned his large ears.
Yeah. That's an interesting observation because a lot of the scripts did not always mention what the monsters were going to look like. I've heard tell that the Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster script, the only description they gave of Ghidorah is it has 3 heads, 2 tails, and it sounds like a bell. And that's all they left of it. And then from there it was up to Tsuburaya to make this brief description.
They must have mentioned in the script that he flies, though, no?
I would imagine that's how he gets around. He didn't hitchhike or anything.
I guess because you fly doesn't mean you have to have wings, I guess.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Hedorah flies without him. But the fact that Godzilla can offer so many different types of stories, even, I mean, we're talking about Godzilla's Revenge and why it's a favorite of yours, despite the fact that tone-wise it's totally different. I think that's a really big strength of Godzilla is the fact that he can be interpreted in all these ways, and there's no better time than now when we have 3 different versions of Godzilla going on. We have Shin Godzilla, the legendary Godzilla series, and the Netflix ones, which are also being very controversial because they're so unlike any Godzilla that came before. Everyone has a different version of him, and no one of them is really superior to the others.
Now, is Toho involved with all versions?
Yes. Toho maintains the ownership of the character as far as I know.
So we did talk about, well, I guess a lot earlier. You mentioned you were wondering what the budget was for Godzilla. It actually, at the time of its release, it was the most expensive film in Japan.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, this was the same year that Toho was also funding Seven Samurai, which was also extremely expensive. So there's a good chance that either one of these films, if they had flopped, Toho would have been down.
Yeah. And, it was a success when it came out. And there's a rumor in the movie, Godzilla destroys the Toho theater. And when the movie came out, people were actually watching it in the Toho theater. They were freaking out thinking their whole building was falling down. People ran outside. Think that's true?
Probably not, but it's a fun story.
Godzilla was nominated for Best Picture at the Japanese Academy Awards.
Hey.
It lost to Seven Samurai.
Oh.
And it did win for Best Effects, of course.
Cool.
Nice.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty much all the stuff I have at Godzilla. Do you? I do want to mention real quick. They did a sequel to the American version, which was Godzilla 1985 with Raymond Burr.
And it came out in 1985.
So there was a Godzilla that came out in 1984, right?
It's the same movie, just
right. So they did basically
on one end of the ocean to the other. Yeah.
So they did basically the same thing they did with. Is Raymond Burr in the Japanese version of that?
No.
Right.
But what's interesting is that the American cut of Godzilla, of Godzilla King of the Monsters, was shown theatrically in Japan afterwards. I think it was called Kaiju Gojira or something like that, which would basically translate as Godzilla, King Godzilla, or Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's something like that. Yeah. But the fact that the American cut was well enough done that they were content to show it back in its homeland. I don't know how the Japanese reacted to it, but presumably it's there. You can find a lot of posters for the American release.
Yeah, they had the sequel, Godzilla 1985, which ignored all previous sequels.
It ignores the movies in the Showa series except for the original,
Oh, wow.
Which I find pretty interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about the first Godzilla and its American counterpart?
At this point, Gojira is a film that was not available in America for a long time. Now there's 2 different DVD versions of it. I think every monster kid owes it to themselves to have both versions. That's the thing. And for me, it's not so much a matter of choosing which film is the better of the 2. I think they're both very good movies. They're just both different viewpoints of the same solid story in the end. And I think at this point, if you haven't seen Gojira, go check it out. They're pretty easy to find now. And yeah, keep the Godzilla spirit alive. I don't
know. So yeah, that was our episode on Gorija.
Nope.
Kaiju Gojira Tasukite!
That was our episode on the Japanese and American version of Godzilla. We hope you enjoyed it.
Where can we find you?
If you're looking for my work online, a lot of the monster stuff I do, you can find me at aidancasserly.com, as well as scapulacomic.com. I've been doing a comic series for the past 12 years or so that has a lot of monster references in it, a lot of classic monster references. We have a villain who lives in a wax museum lair, which is filled with monsters. And one of our most recent issues is Scapula and the Sinister Monster Doom Legion, which not only has a story about that wax museum and monsters maybe coming to life, we also have a Kaiju story, which is filled with homages to a lot of the Godzilla films, including the original one we've been talking about. You can find all of the stories and more again at scapulacomic.com, or if you want to follow my work, go to aidancasserly.com, as well as the Facebook Aidan Casserly Art Group. I'm also on Instagram. And there's Aidan Casserly, the breakfast cereal, Aidan Casserly, the flamethrower, Aidan Casserly, the doll, me.
Peter Schwartz be with you.
Adorable.
And you appear regularly in Burbank areas, right?
I've been spotted going through garbage cans at 2 a.m. I don't believe those rumors are true. I try to do as many conventions as I can. Some of them I swing, some of them I don't. My next convention, I believe, will probably be Midsummer Scream in Long Beach in, I want to say, July.
We'll be there.
There are some very wonderful horror and comic book stores that carry my work. Definitely check out Dark Delicacies, Black Cat, the Hyena Gallery.
We'll link them all in our blog post.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And where can we find you guys?
Pods and Monsters.
Oh, we're Pods and Monsters. Podsandmonsters.com. Pods and Monsters podcast on Instagram. Pods and Monsters on Facebook and Twitter.
You did it.
Yay!
So for Pods and Monsters, my name is Robert.
My name is Inthia.
And we're here with...
Aidan Casserly, signing off from Tokyo Bay.
And with that, thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Sayonara.
Well, this is practically where I came in.